Before the story begins, try to picture this. A child born inside a laboratory. Engineered to be a weapon. Measured, scanned, and marked as a failure. Before he ever learned to speak. Not strong enough. Not fast enough. Unfit for combat, they said. So he disappeared into a forgotten station high in the mountains, where machines could not follow. And only the cold, the pain, and the silence kept him company. Years passed. He did not return with enhanced strength or engineered reflexes. He returned with something no system could model. Discipline carved into bone. Endurance learned from every fall. And the will to stand in a world built to break him. Tonight, you will follow the boy they designed to collapse. Through the war they never planned he would survive. Stay with me until the last word. Because the moment you think you know how this ends is exactly when you'll learn why he was never meant to kneel. In 2158, the lights inside Gen Lab 7 hold never really went dark. They only dimmed to a softer white. Kale Iries sat on the edge of the diagnostic bed. Cold metal pressed against bare feet that looked too small for the data on the screen. Numbers scrolled above him in 3 vertical columns. Muscle density. Bone strength. Reflex latency. Each line shifted from gray to yellow, then to a dull orange. Threshold minimum not reached. The system paused. A single word blinked into existence at the bottom of the display. Failed. The letters were a deep red. Steady and calm. Not flashing. Not angry. Just final. A nurse adjusted the sensor ring at his wrist. Her gloves brushed his skin once. The contact felt more clinical than human. Do you understand what that means? She asked. Kale looked up at the word. He studied it as if it were a new symbol in a language lesson. It means my numbers are wrong, he said. She hesitated. It means your body is not suited for the Gene Legion initiative. He watched his own reflection in the screen. Too thin neck. Too narrow shoulders. Eyes a little too large for his face. If I am wrong, he asked quietly, why can I still feel the pain in my legs? The nurse's mouth tightened. Pain is just a signal, she said. It does not mean you are useful. She tapped a control on her wrist pad. The word failed grew a little brighter, then stored itself along a row of other names. Kale followed the movement of her hand, not the word. The way she avoided his eyes told him more than the report. The door opened with a soft hiss. Dr. Celian Korv stepped inside, gray hair pulled back, coat unbuttoned at the collar. Leave us, Korv said. The nurse slipped out, the door sealing behind her. Korv studied the display. He did not look surprised. If anything, he looked tired. Kale, he said. Your scans are complete. Kale kept his gaze on the ceiling. The panels there were dotted with tiny vents that whispered recycled air into the room. Am I being recycled too? He asked. Korv exhaled slowly. You are not being terminated, he said. But you will not enter the primary combat program. Because I am weak, Kale said. Because the models say your body will not survive a standard deployment. Korv replied. Kale lowered his gaze. His legs dangled off the edge of the bed. They did not reach the small step beneath. So the models decide, he said. Korv did not answer at once. He looked at the word failed again, then back at the boy. Sometimes they do, he said. And sometimes they're the only thing we have. Outside the diagnostics wing, the training halls of Gen Lab 7 hold shook with a different rhythm. The rhythm of impact. Gene warrior candidates moved in perfect synchronization. Their bodies were taller, shoulders broad, movements smooth and economical. Gravity in their chamber cycled between normal and 1.5 g. They did not stumble. They adjusted with almost casual grace. Kale watched them from behind a pane of reinforced glass. His wrist still carried a faint ring of red from the sensor band. A low voice spoke beside him. You like watching them? The man asked. Kale turned. A soldier stood there, older than the trainers in the hall. His uniform was standard Dominion gray, but the left sleeve hung empty. His left arm ended at the shoulder. The fabric had been folded and sealed. They move like the recordings, Cale said, as if they already know they will not fall. The man smiled without much humor. They were born into the right gravity, he said. They were engineered for this room. He nodded toward Cale's thin frame. The weak pose no threat when they remain within the domain of the strong. The man said softly. Cale looked up. What does that mean? He asked. It means this place was never built for you, the soldier said. It was built for them. In the hall, a whistle sounded. The candidates shifted formation with a snap that felt like a single shared spine. Do you ever miss your arm? Cale asked. The soldier flexed the fingers of his remaining hand. I miss what I thought it meant, he said. The arm was just bone and muscle. He glanced at Cale. Do not spend your whole life trying to fit inside a room built for someone else. He added. The alarm for test chamber 3 interrupted them. A soft tone, then a recorded voice calling for staff reallocation. Dr. Corv's name flashed on the wall to Cale's right. The soldier gave a brief nod and walked away. Later that day, Corv brought Cale into a smaller chamber. No training squads here. Only machines. One more set of readings, Corv said. Low risk. The room was a cylinder of white metal. Sensors lined the walls. A pressure dome waited overhead, its seams faint lines in the ceiling. Cale stepped into the marked circle on the floor. His bare feet felt the slight texture of anti-slip coating. Stand still, Corv said through the intercom. Breath evenly. Cale inhaled. The air tasted of metal and disinfectant. There was a faint click above him. Then another, sharper one. On Corv's console, a pressure curve began to rise. The line was smooth for 5 seconds. On the 6th, it jumped. Cale felt it a moment later. His ears popped. The air thinned too quickly. Warning lights flashed amber on the wall. System voice spoke in a calm tone. Pressure variance detected, it said. Stabilization protocol engaged. The curve on Corv's screen went wild. Instead of flattening, it plunged. Shut it down, Corv snapped. The technician at his side was already moving, fingers dancing over manual overrides. It is not responding, she said. Inside the chamber, Cale's lungs burned. His vision blurred at the edges, then narrowed. He dropped to his knees without thinking. Hands pressed flat to the floor. He lowered his head, forcing his chest to expand against the restriction. Longer exhales. Short, sharp inhales. He remembered the soldier's missing arm. The floor vibrated as emergency vents opened. A roar of rushing air filled the space. The pressure curve on the console jerked back toward normal. Cale collapsed on his side. The world dimmed, then tilted back toward him. When the door finally opened, Corv knelt beside him. He checked the boy's pupils, then the pulse at his throat. You should be unconscious, Corv said. Cale coughed once. The sound was thin but steady. I did not want to fall, he whispered. Corv frowned. You would have blacked out before you hit the floor, he said. But I did not, Cale replied. Later, in Corv's office, the data replayed in silent lines. Oxygen saturation, heart rate, blood pressure. All of them dipped into dangerous territory. Then, against expectation, they rose again. His body compensated, the technician said. But he has no gene set for adaptive lung capacity. Corv replayed the sensor feeds. The system had measured everything it knew to measure. None of it explained the boy on his knees, forcing his breaths. Maybe the error is in our thresholds, Corv said. The technician shook her head. Or in the way we define failure, she answered. When the room emptied, Corv stayed seated. He stared at the failed mark in Cale's record. Ko loi kong fi du ko the, he murmured. Maybe it is in the way we measure the body. Outside his office, the corridors of Gen Lab 7 hummed with quiet efficiency. Carts glided along tracks in the floor. Doors slid open only when sensors decided someone deserved to pass. Cale walked those corridors with a thin blanket around his shoulders. His feet made almost no sound. He knew now he would never wear the gray training harness of the Gene Legion Initiative. The system had decided. In the archive wing, the lights were lower. Most of the shelves held hollow slabs tagged in bright blue. Advanced Combat Theory. Strategic Modeling. Neural Enhancement Protocols. At the back, one shelf carried older, dustier tags. The labels were a faded amber. He ran his fingers along them. The titles here were different. Kinetic Body Methods. Non-Amplified Combat Forms. Historical Close Quarters Study. Out of date, someone had written on a small metal strip. Cale slid one of the slabs free. The surface warmed under his fingertips. Images flickered to life in the air above it. Bodies moving without armor. Feet grounded. Hands relaxed, then hardening at impact. It looked nothing like the training in the hall. No gravity shifts. No exoskeletal assist. Just weight. Timing. Breath. A soft chime sounded at the end of the row. The archive supervisor appeared at the corner, tablet in hand. "That section is deprecated," she said. "Those methods do not scale for Legion combat." Cale hugged the slab closer. "Then no one needs it," he said. "Correct," she replied. "Then it will not be missed," he added. She frowned. "Where are you assigned now?" she asked. "I failed," Cale said simply. "So I am not sure." Something in his voice made her pause. She turned away to log a note on her tablet. By the time she looked up, the aisle was empty. Hours later, the sun over Beseda Gamma slid below the horizon. The high atmosphere turned from pale blue to a muted violet. Inside Gen Lab 7 hold, the exterior cameras switched to night sensitivity. Image noise reduced. Edges sharpened. Most of the traffic at that hour moved along designated shuttle lanes. Authorized vehicles. Authorized bodies. On the northern perimeter feed, a small figure moved between pools of light. No escort. No clearance patch. The system flagged the shape as low threat. Mass too small. No visible weapon. No one in the control room zoomed the feed. No one asked why a child was walking toward the dark line of the mountains. The figure carried something flat against its chest. Light from the facility glinted once on the edge of a hollow slab. Cale did not look back. Wind off the distant peaks cut through his thin clothes. It made his eyes water, but he did not slow. "If I was built to break," he said under his breath, "then I will learn how to bend." Far behind him, Gen Lab 7 hold settled into its night cycle. Vent fans shifted speed. Lights dimmed a fraction more. On the log for perimeter monitoring, one entry recorded a minor anomaly. Unverified motion. No tactical significance. 2 weeks after leaving Gen Lab 7 hold, Cale Iris could no longer feel his toes. The wind on Beseda Gamma's northern ridge cut through his thin clothes like wire. Snow did not fall in soft flakes there. It drifted in hard grains. Each grain stung exposed skin like sand under pressure. He pulled the stolen hollow slab tighter against his chest. Its surface was cold now. The power cell had almost drained. The mountains ahead rose in layers of dark rock and ice. Somewhere beyond the next crest lay Wreath Peak Station. That was what the old maps in the archive had called it. His breath came in short, uneven bursts. The air was thinner at this altitude. Every step felt like he was moving through someone else's gravity. He stumbled on a patch of hidden ice. His knees slammed into rock. The shock traveled up his legs and into his spine. For a moment he stayed on all fours. He listened to the wind. He listened to his own breathing. Cold crept up his legs, slow and patient. His fingers refused to close fully. They trembled when he tried. "If I stop now," he whispered, "they will only find a small shape in the snow." He forced himself upright again. The ridge above him blurred, then sharpened. His eyes watered from the wind, not from anything else. At some point, he realized the line of rock in front of him was not natural. Metal ribs jutted from the cliff face, half buried in ice. A short tower leaned at an angle, its antenna broken. Wreath Peak Station did not look like a place anyone sane would choose. It looked like a ruin that had decided not to fall yet. Cale reached the outer hatch and slapped a numb hand against the panel. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. For a moment, he thought the station truly was dead. Then a narrow slit opened above the hatch. A camera eye slid into view. It studied him. A thin boy. No suit. No mask. The hatch cycled with a protesting groan. Warm air rushed out in a gust that smelled faintly of dust and old oil. Cale stepped inside and collapsed. When he woke, he was lying on a narrow cot. A heavier blanket covered him up to the chin. Someone had removed his boots and wrapped his feet. The ceiling was low. Exposed conduits crossed it like old scars. He tried to sit up. A voice stopped him. "Stay down," the voice said. "Your blood is still learning how to move again." A man stepped into his view. He was tall, but carried himself as if the station's low ceiling insisted on a bow. His hair was cut close to the skull, threaded with gray. "My name is Hovan Rake," he said. "I was told this station was decommissioned," Cale said. "It is," Hovan answered. "Which is why I am still here." Cale tried to move his toes under the blankets. Pins and needles stabbed up his legs. "I walked from Gen Lab 7, he said. "I need to learn how not to break." Hovan studied him for a long moment. "Most people who come here want to learn how to kill faster," Hovan said. "You are the first one to ask how not to break." Cale swallowed. "My body fails their numbers," he said. "But it survived their mistakes." "What you mean is it survived their system," Hovan replied. He pulled a low stool beside the cot and sat. "You understand what this place used to be?" he asked. "A mountain relay and training outpost," Cale said. "For high-altitude infantry." Hovan nodded once. "We trained people here to function where machines were not sure yet," he said. "No exosuits. No gene assist." He leaned closer. His eyes were sharp and clear. "Training to be strong is wrong," Hovan said. "Training not to break is how you survive." The words landed in Cale's mind with a weight that felt right. He thought of the pressure chamber. He thought of his knees hitting cold stone hours earlier. "I want that kind of training," he said. Hovan did not answer at once. He studied Cale's wrists, his shoulders, the set of his jaw. "Then you will break many times here," Hovan said. "But you will break on purpose. Under control. Under watch." He stood. "Sleep now," he said. "In the morning we will see if your decision survives the night." Morning on Wreath Peak Station arrived without sunlight. The outer shutters stayed closed against the wind. Inside, yellow lamps hummed to life on a timer. Cale stood barefoot on a strip of worn padding in what had once been a loading bay. Hovan faced him 10 steps away. "Show me how you fall," Hovan said. Cale frowned. "I thought you would show me how to stand," he said. "If you do not understand falling, standing will be an accident," Hovan replied. He moved forward in 3 unhurried steps. His palm touched Cale's chest with no more force than a greeting. Cale lost his balance at once. His heels slipped on the padding. He went down in a clumsy twist of legs and elbows. The impact knocked air from his lungs. Pain blossomed along one rib. "Again," Hovan said. They repeated the process. Dozens of times. Sometimes Hovan pushed from different angles. Sometimes he swept Cale's feet instead. Each time, Cale hit the floor. Shoulder. Hip. Back. By the end of the session, his body felt like someone else's bad idea. Hovan crouched beside him. His voice stayed calm. "What hurts the most?" he asked. "Everything," Cale rasped. "Too vague," Hovan said. "Be specific." Cale closed his eyes. He traced the pain like lines on a map. "Right rib," He said. Left shoulder. Both wrists. Where did you meet the ground first? Hoven asked. Cale replayed the last fall in his mind. Too much on the spine, he said. Hoven nodded. Good, he said. Feeling is data. We use it. He tapped the floor with one knuckle. This surface does not change, Hoven said. You must change. Your path through the fall must spread the force. Over the next weeks, they moved from careless falls to guided ones. Hoven showed him how to roll with a push instead of resisting it. How to let the center of his body pivot before his limbs tried to catch up. Every mistake was marked in ache and bruise. Once, he misjudged a landing so badly that a sharp crack echoed in the bay. White pain shot up his arm. Hoven reached him in 2 strides. He touched the swelling wrist with practiced fingers. Fracture, Hoven said. You will remember this better than any lecture. He pressed a band of Smartrap around the joint. Microfilaments tightened. Heat blossomed under the skin. I am sorry, Cale said through clenched teeth. Do not apologize for breaking here, Hoven said. Here is the place designed for it. Under the bandage, tiny actuators aligned bone fragments with gentle precision. It would heal faster than it would have in the wild. But it would still hurt. You do not need to be stronger than a perfect soldier, Hoven said. You just need fewer collisions with the world than he has. The idea lodged somewhere deep. Cale carried it with him into every session. They added footwork. Steps that seemed wrong to him at first. Angles that felt like mistakes until he saw how they stole power from an incoming strike. You are not a wall, Hoven said one day. You are a hinge. Cale repeated the drills until his legs trembled. He fell. He rose. He fell again. Every night, lying on the narrow cot, he mapped the day's impacts in his mind. Every patch of pain was a mark on a chart he was slowly learning to read. Winter did not truly leave Wreath Peak. It only shifted altitude. Sometimes snow beat against the station hull with a steady hiss. Sometimes the air outside was so still that the cold felt sharp rather than heavy. Hoven led Cale to an exterior access module. They stood in a small chamber with a narrow window showing only white. The air out there is thin, Hoven said. Not as thin as the high stratosphere. Thin enough to matter. Cale's lungs still remembered the pressure chamber. A memory of burning edges. What are we doing? He asked. Teaching your heart not to panic, Hoven said. He handed Cale a simple mask connected to an internal line. No suits, he said. Just this. You will feel the cold. You will feel the thinness. You will not fight them. The outer door opened with a slow grind. Cold air poured in like water from a broken tank. They stepped out onto a narrow ledge anchored into the rock. Snow had formed a low ridge along its outer edge. The sky above was a hard, pale blue. The world below was hidden in clouds. Walk, Hoven said. Cale walked. Every breath felt too small. The mask delivered air, but not as much as his body wanted. When you feel like you need more, Hoven said behind him, do not obey that feeling at once. Wait 1 heartbeat. Then breathe. Cale concentrated. He counted in his head. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. The cold gnawed at his fingers where gloves ended. It tried to crawl up his arms. You are not here to be comfortable, Hoven said. You are here to prove to yourself that panic is just a badly timed alarm. They walked the length of the ledge and back again. Then again. Cale's legs grew heavy. His head felt light. Dots danced at the edge of his vision. He wanted to suck in a great lungful of air. He held back. 1 heartbeat. Then another. He breathed on the 3rd. The air that arrived tasted thin but enough. Inside the station later, Hoven showed him the monitor feed. A simple graph of heartbeats taken from a sensor on his arm. See here, Hoven said. This is where your body wanted to run. You did not answer. The line steadied. The peaks evened out. An engine that surges will burn itself out, Hoven said. A heart is the same. We want an engine that can stay on as long as needed. They repeated the exercise many times. Some days with more wind. Some days with less air. Each time, the fear came a little later. Each time, his heart obeyed his count a little more easily. Out in the frozen air, with nothing but rock and sky listening, Cale found a strange kind of quiet. Out there, fear did not shout. It whispered, then faded before his breath did. By the time his third cold season on Wreath Peak rolled across the mountain, Cale had grown taller. Not much broader. But his movements no longer belonged to a child. He stood in the training bay without a shirt. Old bruises had faded. New ones mapped fresh constellations across his ribs and shoulders. His stance was relaxed. His weight shifted easily from foot to foot without thought. Hoven circled him with the slow patience of an old predator. Again, he said. Cale stepped. Turned his hip. Let an invisible strike slide past where his head had been an instant before. His feet drew patterns on the floor. Not pretty patterns. Useful ones. They finished the sequence. Hoven nodded once. You do not move like their soldiers, he said. Is that a problem? Cale asked. It will be their problem, Hoven said. Later that evening, the station's ancient comm array crackled to life. It had been mostly silent for months. Only occasional weather beacons. Old orbital traffic. This time, the signal carried the formal cadence of an official broadcast. The emblem of the Sovereign Dominion flickered onto the one working screen in the mess hall. A stylized star encircled by laurel. Attention citizens and units of the Dominion. A voice announced. By decree of Central Command, the new Gene Legion Mark II is commencing full deployment. Cale stood in the doorway and listened. Words rolled out in even, practiced lines. In the coming cycles, 100,000 optimized combat units will secure our territories, the voice said. Our enemies will face a perfected line of defense. Images followed. Rows of soldiers stepping in flawless unison. Every face similar. Every movement identical. He remembered the training hall below Gen Lab 7 hold. He remembered the climb through the snow. He remembered every impact with the station floor. Hoven muted the sound. The lips on the screen kept moving in silence. They are building a wave, Hoven said. A wave that will not question the shore it breaks on. Cale felt a tightness in his chest. Not fear. Not exactly. If I stay here, he said, I remain one boy on one ridge. Hoven did not answer at once. He studied Cale's face. The lines that had settled there over 3 hard seasons. This place was never meant to be a cave to hide in. Hoven said. It is a forge. Cale looked at his hands. The fingers were still slender. But the small tremors he had once carried were gone. I do not need to evolve like them, he said. I only need to make them hesitate for 1 second. 1 second on the wrong battlefield changes entire maps, Hoven said. Outside, the wind screamed against the hull and then dropped to a low moan. Inside, the station's old pressure gauges ticked softly as systems adjusted. By his 3rd season on the peak, Cale's breathing matched that sound. Slow. Steady. As reliable as any instrument on the wall. The shuttle that brought Cale down from Wreath Peak Station smelled of oil and old fear. The kind that never really left metal once it soaked in. He sat near the back, hands flat on his knees. Hoven Rake stood by the bulkhead, one hand resting on a support bar. Through the small side window, Beseda Gamma's low clouds slid past in slow layers. Below them, the lights of Fort Helisar burned in a tight cluster. You still have time to stay on the mountain, Hoven said. Cale shook his head. If I stay up there, he said, the wave will pass without me. Hoven studied him for a moment. You remember what we trained, he said. Fall with intention, Cale replied. Turn with the force. Breathe on the 3rd beat, not the 1st. Hoven gave a short nod. Do not forget the other lesson, he said. You are not here to prove their numbers wrong. You are here to keep people breathing. The shuttle touched down with a jolt that rattled his teeth. Outside, cold air rushed in again, but this time it carried the smell of fuel and many boots. Fort Helisar was cut into the rock like a scar. Angular walls. Shield dishes half buried from older bombardments. Newer armor plating welded over old wounds. 2 guards met them at the landing pad. Their armor was mixed. Some pieces old Dominion issue. Some repainted civilian plating. One of them eyed Kale's thin frame with open doubt. "This the recruit you talked about?" the guard asked Hoven. "This is Kale Iries," Hoven said. "He is not a recruit. He is a choice." The guard snorted. "Does the choice come with heavy gene lines?" he asked. "No gene enhancements," Hoven said. "Only a working nervous system and a stubborn heart." The guard looked at Kale again. "If you do not bring heavy genes," he said, "you bring dead weight." Kale met his eyes. "I brought something else," he said. "I will show you where it matters." Inside the command hall, a map of Tharsis Divide floated over a table. Red icons marked Dominion positions. Blue lights indicated the scattered units of the Freehold Resistance Fleet. Captain Yoran Avil stood at the head of the table. Tall. Broad. Scar along one cheek like an old punctuation mark. He glanced up as they approached. "Hoven," he said. "You were supposed to retire by disappearing, not by dragging children into my war." "This is not your war," Hoven said. "It belongs to everyone who lives under their sky." Yoran's gaze shifted to Kale. "Name," he said. "Kale Iries," Kale answered. "Service record?" Yoran asked. "None," Kale said. "Gen Lab 7 flagged me as a failed candidate." Murmurs rose from nearby officers. Someone gave a low whistle. Yoran raised one eyebrow. "So they rejected you," he said. "And you thought we would take what they threw away." "You need people who think different," Kale said. "If you keep copying their model, you will keep losing to their model." The room went quiet. Even the map's soft hum seemed to dim. "Bold mouth for a thin frame," one of the lieutenants said. Hoven's voice cut in, calm but firm. "He survived a pressure failure inside their lab," Hoven said. "No gene boosts. No suit. He walked to my station over open ice. You want someone who will not fold when the numbers say he should. You have one." Yoran studied Kale for a long second. "We do not have time for long trials," Yoran said. "Tharsis Divide is heating up. We move in 2 days." He pointed at Kale. "You want in," he said. "You run with 4th Squad. You keep up. You do not get anyone killed with your experiments." "If I fail," Kale said, "you can leave me there." Hoven's jaw tightened at that. Yoran's expression did not change. "If you fail," Yoran said, "the Dominion will not need our help finishing you." Kale nodded once. He had not come for guarantees. Tharsis Divide looked less like a battlefield from the air and more like a broken planet. Ridges and deep cuts. Dust hanging over everything like a second sky. 4th Squad moved through one of the lower gullies. Rocks rose on either side, black and jagged. The air tasted of metal and the faint residue of old plasma burns. Their armor was lighter than Dominion standard. Patchwork plates. Smart fabric underneath. Kale wore only a chest rig, padding on elbows and knees, and an old helmet that had seen better days. "You sure about bringing him?" one squad member muttered over the short range. "He is Rake's project," another answered. "If he breaks, that is on the mountain man." Kale listened, but did not respond. His focus sat lower, in his feet, in the way the ground shifted under each step. The weeks of falling and rolling in Wreath Peaks Bay had etched a map in his muscles. They reached a bend in the gully. Yoran's voice came through the link. "Contact in 3 minutes," he said. "Gene Legion Vanguard units. Expect enhanced reflexes. Watch the high walls. They like to drop in." Kale's heart rate ticked up once. He counted. 1, 2, 3. Then he let the next breath out slowly. The first Dominion shells came in as a distant rumble. Then closer. The gully walls caught the sound and threw it back in layers. Dust plumes rose ahead. Fourth squad spread out along the sides, using rock outcrops as cover. Shapes appeared at the far end. Taller. Heavier. Moving with a confidence that said this environment belonged to them. Gene Legion troopers. Their armor hugged their bodies like a second skin. Their visors gleamed in a single line. Their steps were quiet despite their mass. Hold fire, Yoren said over the link. Wait for the crosspoint. The gully narrowed at the center. Exactly where the two forces would be closest. The Legion troopers advanced with the steady momentum of an incoming tide. Fourth squad crouched behind rocks and broken slabs. When the first Legion trooper stepped into the narrowest point, Yoren's voice snapped. Now. Fourth squad broke from cover. Shots flashed from shoulder mounts and rifles. Kale moved with them, but not like them. He angled himself slightly off to one side, not taking the straight line a trained soldier would. The first Legion trooper to reach him swung a shock pulse baton. The weapon hummed with contained charge. Kale saw the line of the strike, not just its destination. Shoulders. Hips. The weight shift behind it. He stepped in, not back. His movement stole space from the weapon. His front foot slid along the gully floor, pivoting his center. The baton passed where his head had been a fraction earlier. As it did, his forearm brushed the Legion trooper's wrist just enough to redirect the arc. He let the force continue, not trying to halt it. His body turned with it, a hinge instead of a wall. The trooper's own momentum carried him off balance. For a brief instant, weight floated where it should have been grounded. Kale dropped his center and hooked a foot behind the trooper's ankle. A twist, a pull, and the heavier body met the ground hard. Dust jumped under the impact. Before the trooper could recover, Kale's hand struck the side of the helmet just below the visor line. Not with brute power. With precise direction. The impact jolted the neck at a dangerous angle. The trooper's limbs stiffened, then went slack. For a heartbeat, the gully seemed to pause. One of the squad soldiers swore softly. He dropped a Legion with no augment, someone said. Another voice cut through. Focus, Yoren barked. They will adapt. He was right. Two more Legion troopers shifted their stance almost in unison. Their movements changed. Less committed weight. Shorter arcs. Somewhere in their helmets, an AI cluster wrote a new line of prediction. Kale's odd angles were no longer an unreadable script. The next baton strike came in lower, then feinted high. Kale moved to redirect it as before, but the timing was off. The trooper adjusted mid-swing, something no unassisted human could have done smoothly. The baton clipped Kale's shoulder. Pain exploded down his arm. His vision flashed white at the edges. He forced one more step, rolling with the impact instead of meeting it. The ground rose to meet him in a less controlled fall than he liked. He hit, rolled, came up on one knee. A bolt of Dominion fire tore a chunk from the rock above his head. Left flank collapsing, a voice shouted over the link. Kale stole a glance. Fourth squad was being driven back. The Legion line pressed forward with the cold efficiency of a machine tightening a vise. One clean takedown was not enough against a system that rewrote itself in real time. He felt the lesson sink in through the dull roar of pain. The mech stepped into the gully with the slow confidence of something that feared nothing on the ground. It was 3 times Kale's height, all angular armor and heavy joints. Its steps shook dust from the gully walls. Armor walker, someone yelled. Back, back, back. The mech's forward cannon pivoted. A pulse round left its barrel with a sound that was less like a shot and more like a deep mechanical breath. The blast hit a rock outcrop, turning stone into a cloud of shards. 2 resistance fighters disappeared in the spray. Helisar command, we need heavy response, Yoren said over the link. Now. Negative, came the reply. Artillery is committed on the northern line. You are on your own for 3 minutes. 3 minutes against a walker and a full Legion unit might as well have been 3 hours. Kale pushed himself behind a jut of stone. His shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. The gully floor ahead of him sloped down toward a pile of broken masonry. Once, maybe, it had been part of a Dominion forward sensor post. Now it was just rubble. A thin sound cut through the noise of battle. Not the whine of servos. Not the crack of rifles. A higher note. Raw. A child's cry. Kale's eyes locked onto the rubble pile. A small arm stuck out from under a slab of concrete and metal mesh. The fingers opened and closed weakly. In that moment, the noise of the battle receded. Not fully. Just enough for a memory to stand up. A boy walking into thin air and hard snow, carrying a hollow slab against his ribs. "Rake," Kale called. "Cover me." He did not wait for an answer. He moved. The mech's cannon cycled again. A shot tore up the ground meters away, throwing him sideways. He rolled with it, curled around his injured shoulder, and came up lower, closer to the rubble. The air tasted of dust and that strange hot tang that followed energy weapons. He reached the broken slab and dropped to his knees. The small arm twitched again. "Hey," he said. "Stay with me. Stay exactly where you are." "I cannot move," a small voice answered. "Good," Kale said. "That means you will not make things worse while I do something probably foolish." He tested the edge of the slab. Too heavy for a straight lift. Another pulse round slammed into the gully wall above. Fragments rained down around them. His heart hammered. He counted. 1, 2, 3. He exhaled and slid his good shoulder under the edge of the slab. He angled his legs, remembering every drill on how to turn force away from the spine. Instead of pushing straight up, he twisted. The slab shifted. A gap opened. "Can you pull your legs back?" he asked. "I think so," the voice said. He saw her now. Dark hair matted with dust. Face streaked but eyes clear and wide. "One at a time," he said. "Slow. No sudden moves. We are not racing anyone." She dragged one leg free, then the other. Each movement sent a fresh spike from his shoulder down his side as he held the slab off just enough. When she was clear, he let the slab drop. It hit the ground with a heavy thud that vibrated through his bones. "Can you stand?" he asked. "My ankle hurts," she said. "But I can try." He helped her up with his good arm. Her weight was nothing compared to what he had just held. But in that moment it felt like the most important load on the field. "Name?" he asked. "Mira," she said. "Stay behind me, Mira," he said. "Keep your head low. If I fall, you crawl to the nearest rock and pretend it is a wall." She nodded, eyes too old for her small face. Behind them, the mech turned its attention down the gully again. Its sensors had marked new targets. Rake's voice came over the link, sharp and close. "Left side, down," Hoven called. "Covering fire now." Shots from the resistance line stitched across the walker's armor. Most glanced off. Some found joints and softer plates. It was not enough to stop it. But it was enough to make it adjust. Any adjustment was time. Kale guided Mira toward a thicker outcrop. His shoulder protested each step. "I understand now," he said between breaths. "Understand what?" Hoven asked, hearing him on the open line. "I am not fast enough yet," Kale said. "Not steady enough. Not for this many moving pieces." "You are alive enough," Hoven said. "That is the only state that can change." The order to fall back came as the gully started to look more like a grave than a path. "All squads, retreat to fallback marker Delta," Yoren said. "Do not get pinned. Move." Fourth squad began to peel away in sections. 2 covering. 2 moving past. Kale stayed near the rear with Hoven, Mira between them. The mech stepped forward again. Slower now but still lethal. Its cannon pivoted, seeking the densest knots of blue on its tactical map. A sharp whine rose as it charged for another shot. Down, Hoven barked. Kale pushed Mira flat against the rock. He dropped beside her. The shot hit farther up the gully, turning a high part of the wall into a shower of rock and dust. Shards flew like knives. Something hit Kale's helmet. The world rang for a second. When the sound cleared, he heard Hoven's breathing next to him. Rough. Uneven. He turned. A jag of rock as long as his forearm was lodged in Hoven's side. Just below the ribs. Blood soaked the fabric in a dark, widening patch. Hoven, Kale said. Hoven's face was pale, but his eyes were steady. Keep moving, Hoven said. Get her out. We can stabilize you at Delta, Kale said. Listen, Hoven cut in. His voice held the same tone it carried on the mountain when he corrected a stance. All your life, you have been watching where force lands, Hoven said. This is the same. The battle is not one strike. It is every reason behind why you are still on your feet. Mira clung to Kale's arm. Her eyes shone with fear and dust. I will not leave you here, Kale said. You will, Hoven said. Because you finally understand that falling in the right place can hold a line. He shifted slightly, grimacing. He pressed something into Kale's good hand. A small metal tag. Old. Edges worn smooth. Give this to Avel, Hoven said. Tell him he was right to distrust comfort and wrong to distrust you. Another shot boomed down the gully. Closer this time. Hoven pushed against the rock with his uninjured arm, forcing himself into a half-crouch. I can still draw their fire, he said. I have done it before. I know how their sensors read a standing target. Kale's throat tightened. This is not training, he said. It never was, Hoven replied. Even on the mountain. He placed his hand on Kale's shoulder, above the bruised joint. The grip was firm, then softened. Do not try to win with the last strike, Hoven said. Win with the reason you are still standing. His hand slipped away. Before Kale could argue again, Hoven stepped out from behind the rock. He straightened his back. For a moment, he looked almost like he had years ago, training troops for another war. The mech's sensors snapped to him. Its cannon tracked his movement. Hoven raised his arms, weapons in both hands. He fired in short, precise bursts. Not to destroy. To demand attention. The walker answered. Light and force converged on his position. The blast swallowed him in a flare of white and gray. Dust rolled over Kale and Mira, thick and choking. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of stones settling and distant shouts. Then Yoren's voice came through the link again. All units, fall back now, he said. We have a corridor. Do not waste it. Kale pulled Mira close and moved. His steps were unsteady, but they did not stop. Every ache, every pulse of pain in his shoulder and ribs, marked a place where he had not yet broken. That night, the sounds of battle were gone. Fort Helisar's med bay smelled of antiseptic and burned fabric. Kale lay on a narrow bed. His shoulder was strapped. His ribs were tightly bound. Mira slept in the next cot, a blanket pulled up to her chin. A light splint encased her swollen ankle. Between their beds, a monitor displayed 2 lines. 2 heartbeats. His. Hers. The machine ticked out each beat in a soft electronic tone. Not urgent. Not calm. Just steady. He stared at the ceiling. Images from the day replayed in relentless cycles. The Legion trooper hitting the ground. The mech stepping into the gully. Myra's small hand reaching from under the rubble. Hoven stepping out into open fire. I thought one clean move would be enough, he told himself. One perfect redirection. He listened to the monitor for a while. The beats stayed regular. I am not enough yet, he said softly. Not fast enough. Not steady enough. But I am still here. The machine answered with another set of measured tones. 3 weeks after Tharsis Divide, the bruises on Kale Iris's body had faded to yellow. The ache in his shoulder remained like a quiet reminder. Fort Helisar had learned to live with the sound of repairs. Welders hissed. Hammer strikes rang through the lower decks. Kale sat in the command room, watching the replay. The battle over Tharsis Divide unfolded again as lines of light on a hollow map. Legion units here. Resistance positions there. One small marker tagged Rake. Then blinking out. Captain Yoren Avil stood beside him, arms folded. The scar on his cheek caught the light each time the map shifted. You have watched this replay too many times, Yoren said. Not enough, Kale answered. Not until I stop seeing it as a series of accidents. He slowed the feed. The icons moved like careful pieces on a board. Here, Kale said. Where they adjusted to my movement. The map zoomed. Gene Legion units flared with faint outlines showing their engagement vectors. They did not think faster than you, Yoren said. They borrowed thinking from something else. Strategos Prime Node, Kale said. The AI writing micro-patterns in their helmets. He watched his own icon dart, turn, cut down a Legion trooper. Then watched the next wave bend around that move. They aim for perfection, he said. Perfect prediction. Perfect adaptation. Perfection kills slower than good artillery, Yoren muttered. But it still kills. Kale turned away from the map. The more perfect they become, he said, the more fragile they're to something they cannot model. And what do you propose? Yoren asked. Randomness. Not randomness, Kale said. Intent. Something that moves with the Force instead of against it. Yoren's eyes narrowed. Speak plain, he said. On the mountain, Hoven taught me this, Kale said. If you cannot win with force, fight with intent. He stepped to the side of the room, where a slab of armor plating leaned against the wall. He placed his palm against it. If I push straight in, he said, I meet the full strength of what is behind it. He shifted his hand, sliding along the surface. If I guide its strength away, he said, it spends itself somewhere else. You are talking about wrestling with tanks, Yoren said. I am talking about building a system that expects impact, Kale answered. Not one that just tries to crush harder. Yoren stared at him for a moment. And you think we can turn that into something people can wear? He asked. We have smart materials, Kale said. We have actuators. We have more bruises than we need. Force is data. We can route it. Yoren exhaled. You will need engineers, he said. Ones who do not scare easily. Forge 12 Kinetics Lab occupied a long, low level under Fort Helisar. Old Dominion markings still showed through the new paint. Lisa Trent had called it a graveyard the first time she walked in. Now she called it her workshop. She stood over a table of disassembled armor when Kale arrived. Her hair was tied back. Stray strands frizzed from long hours near equipment. You are late, she said without looking up. I was arguing with a map, Kale answered. Did you win? She asked. No, he said. But it lost some of its confidence. That drew a small smile from her. What do you want me to break today? Lisa asked. Kale set a small projector on the table. A model appeared in the air above it. Armor plating. Thin channels running beneath the surface like veins. Nodes at joints. This is not a heavier suit, Kale said. It is a suit that does not believe in taking hits head on. Lisa tilted her head. These channels, she said. Force routing. Force absorption, Kale said. FAS module. Force absorption system. He tapped a node at the shoulder. When impact lands here, he said, the suit should redirect part of it along a path that moves with the incoming vector. So instead of shattering, Lisa said, it guides the hit around the wearer. Exactly, Kale said. Less broken ribs. More controlled falls. Lisa's eyes brightened. I can design actuators that flex on demand, she said. But something has to decide how they flex. Not a central AI, Kale said. It cannot read a body fast enough. And if it does, it will start trying to lead. He pulled another image into view. A slender chip. Neurosignature relay chip, he said. It reads the wearer's own muscle firings and pre-tension, then echoes that through the suit. So the suit follows the nerve signals, Lisa said. Not the other way around. Yes, Kale said. The chips can learn each person's way of moving. But they do not get to override it. Lisa studied him. You do not trust machines much, she said. I do not trust systems that cannot admit they are wrong, Kale replied. She nodded slowly. We can put a limiter on the onboard assistant, Lisa said. Let it suggest, never command. Hard cap its access to motor control. Good, Kale said. If a pilot feels the suit trying to move them, we have already lost. They began work. Days became a pattern of welding, testing, adjusting. Plates bent, buckled, then held. Sensors spat out lines of data that Lisa devoured and rewrote into new designs. Kale wore early frames and let them hit him. He stepped into swings from weighted arms fixed to the wall. He rolled across the lab floor, mapping each impact in his mind and in the suit logs. One afternoon, as they were reviewing a test, an alarm chimed at the far end of the lab. Unauthorized access, the system announced. Lisa frowned. We locked the outer doors, she said. The doors opened anyway. 6 figures stood there in Legion armor stripped of insignia. Helmets off. Faces hard and tired. Lisa reached for the nearest tool. It was heavy enough to break bone. Kale lifted a hand. If they wanted us dead, he said, they would not have knocked. The man at the front stepped forward. His hair was closely cropped. A faint lattice of old neural ports lined the back of his neck. My name is Tarek Volume, he said. I was Gene Legion, 3rd column. Lisa repeated. We killed the handler on our transport, Tarek said. We shut down our link to Stratego's prime node. We want something from you. We do not hand out forgiveness here, Lisa said. Tarek's gaze met Kale's. We do not want forgiveness, Tarek said. We want to learn how not to be controlled. Kale studied their eyes. He had seen Legion troops in battle. Those eyes had been cold, focused, but distant, as if someone else watched through them. These eyes looked bare, exposed. You walked away from perfect coordination, Kale said. We walked away from a war where our thoughts arrived second, Tarek said. Strategos predicted. We executed. There was no space between order and motion. You could have run anywhere, Kale said. You came here. We saw the feeds from Tharsis divide, Tarek said. A small figure moving wrong. A pattern Strategos did not like. The system called you an anomaly. He paused. We decided anomalies were safer than perfection, he said. Yorin arrived a moment later, flanked by 2 guards. They leveled weapons out of habit. We should put them in cells, one guard said. Tarek did not flinch. You can, he said. But if you have any sense of numbers left, you know this. We defecting cost Dominion more than your guns can. Yorin looked at Kale. What do you see? Yorin asked. People whose bodies have been taught to move on command, Kale said. Now trying to learn what a voluntary step feels like. Lisa's voice cut in, steady. And you think you can teach them? She asked. I can show them how to fall on their own terms, Kale said. Yorin lowered his weapon. If any of you try to relay coordinates to Dominion, Yorin said to Tarek, I will space you myself. We cut the implants, Tarek said. All that is left is scar tissue and muscle memory. Lisa glanced at Kale. We can use their experience, she said. And they can test what you are building. They already know what it is like to be extensions of a system. Maybe they will help us design the opposite. Kale nodded. Welcome to the other side, he said to Tarek. This one is messier. It hurts more. But you get to choose where you stand when it hurts. The list for the assault team grew slowly. Names appeared, vanished, then returned. Kale sat in the small briefing room, a simple display in front of him. Yorin paced behind him, reading over his shoulder. You are not sorting by combat hours, Yoren said. No, Kale replied. You are not sorting by gene profile. Yoren said. No, Kale repeated. Yoren stopped. Then what is this column? He asked. Heart rate variance, Kale said. Small graphs sat beside each name. Each showed how a person's pulse shifted under different stress tests. In the mech sim, we put them under fire for 10 minutes, Kale said. We watched their heartbeats. The ones who spike and cannot come down, I leave off the team. The ones who stay flat, I also leave off. You want the middle, Yoren said. I want the ones who feel fear and then bring it back under their own hand. Kale said. If you cannot be moved, you are stone. If you are moved by everything, you are dust. He tapped one name. Mira Lene asked to join. He said quietly. Yoren's jaw tightened. She is a child, Yoren said. She is older in some ways than we were at her age. Kale said. But she will not go on this run. Her heart still jumps at every loud noise. She needs time to grow into her own reasons. Yoren studied the list again. And these, Yoren said, pointing to a cluster of names. Some are defected Legion, Kale said. Tarek among them. Some are Helisar regulars. 1 or 2 are from the outer settlements. A medic entered, holding a tablet. I have final health checks, she said. She handed it to Kale. He scanned the numbers. Your metrics do not flag any of them as likely survivors, he said. She shrugged. My job is to report what bodies can endure, she said. Not what reasons can carry them. Her eyes met his. One of your picks, she said, has a resting heart rate like a calm lake under bombardment. That sounds like someone who does not care, Yoren said. The medic shook her head. I talked to him, she said. He cares too much. He just decided he did not want his pulse to decide for him. She looked back at Kale. His heartbeat pattern said more than any words could, she said softly. He is not afraid of dying. He is afraid of missing the chance to live in a way that matters. Kale let that sink in. That is what I need, he said. People who are not chasing survival, but purpose. Survival is a side effect. Yoren sighed. You are building a team that makes no sense on paper, he said. Good, Kale replied. Paper is where Strategos reads us first. Dawn on Beseda Gamma came slowly. Light seeped over the horizon, turning the low clouds pale silver. In the yard outside Forge 12, racks of iridium frames stood in neat rows. Their surfaces caught the first hints of day. Kale stood in front of them, wearing only a simple shirt and trousers. No armor. His breath steamed faintly in the cool air. Each inhale matched the memory of a pressure gauge ticking on Wreath Peak. Lisa joined him, mug of something hot in her hands. You know most commanders would sleep before a mission, she said. I slept enough when they thought I was broken, he answered. She looked at the frames. They are ready, she said. They will not make anyone invincible. But they will let bodies bend instead of shatter. That is all we ever needed, Kale said. A chime sounded from the comm post. An incoming signal. Here it comes, Lisa murmured. They went inside. In the small comm room, a single screen came to life. The emblem of the Sovereign Dominion appeared first. Then it dissolved into the face of a man. Commander Arcton Vale. Kale had seen him only in briefings and on intercepted feeds. In person, even through a screen, Vale radiated a composed certainty that made rooms feel smaller. Kale Iris, Vale said. Failed candidate. Surviving anomaly. You have my attention. Kale stood straight. I did not ask for it, he said. No, Vale replied. But you took it. You twisted one of my units in Tharsis Divide. You pulled Legion soldiers out of my structure. His gaze sharpened. And now you build a counter-pattern, Vale said. Force absorption. Iridium frames tied to human nerves. It is almost elegant. Lisa shifted slightly beside Kale. He could feel her weight through the floor. What do you want? Kale asked. A simple rearrangement of roles. Vale said. You join me. You lead a special branch of the Gene Legion initiative. I will give you access to more resources than you can imagine. You can refine your ideas across 1,000 worlds. You want me to help you polish the cage, Kale said. Vale smiled faintly. Systems exist, he said. Someone will run them. Better that it be someone who remembers being weak. Why? Kale asked. Because you will be careful, Vale said. You will hesitate before you press people into the mold. And when you finally do, the results will be clean. He spread his hands slightly. I offer you a crown, Vale said. Inside a structure that will outlive you. You can be king within my lattice instead of a ghost outside. Kale let the words hang between them. He thought of Hoven's last stand. He thought of Myra's hand reaching from rubble. He thought of Tarek's scarred neck where implants had once controlled each step. If I accept, Kale said slowly, I become strong the way you define strength. You become effective, Vale corrected. And then I die the way you define a necessary death, Kale said. Vale's eyes narrowed a fraction. You talk like someone who thinks he can avoid dying, Vale said. Everyone dies, Kale said. But some deaths close doors. Yours closes around anyone who steps into it. He leaned slightly closer to the screen. You want a variable you can control, Kale said. I will not give you that. I would rather remain a mistake in your equations than a polished part of them. Vale's expression cooled. You think your refusal matters, Vale said. I will adapt. I always adapt. Strategos Prime will map your choices and we will overwrite them. Maybe, Kale said. But you have already admitted something. You took the time to ask. That means you do not know everything I will do. For the first time, a small line appeared between Vale's brows. Annoyance. This is your last chance, Vale said. No, Kale replied. This was your last chance. To have someone inside who remembers what it feels like to break and still chooses people over patterns. He reached for the control. If I become strong your way, Kale said, I will die exactly how you have planned. If I stay wrong in your system, I might die in a way you did not foresee. He cut the link. The screen went dark, leaving only Kale's reflection. Behind him, Lisa exhaled. That was either the bravest thing I have ever seen, she said, or the most foolish. On Wreath Peak, Kale said, Hoven taught me to fall where it mattered. This is just another step. Outside, the first full light of morning washed over Fort Helisar and the silent rows of iridium frames. While Kale stood unarmored at the threshold, already carrying the weight his armor would only learn to follow. There were no windows inside the launch corridor. Only the sound of air cycling and the dull thump of boots on metal. Kale Iris checked the gauge on his wrist once more. 6 hours of breathable air. Not 1 minute more. The iridium frame around him hummed softly. Force channels waited under the plates like a second set of muscles. They would not make him stronger. They would help him not break all at once. Ahead, the inner hatch to the drop tube stood closed. Behind him, the small strike team shifted their weight in quiet readiness. Tarek Volume flexed his hands inside his own frame. Old Legion reflexes sat under new choices. This is a long way to go just to punch a factory. Tarek said. We are not punching it, Kale said. We are pushing on one hinge. Explain that in words for people who did not grow up on a mountain. Lisa Trent's voice came through the channel. She watched from Forge 12, deep inside Fort Helisar. Kale looked at the sealed hatch. History does not turn all at once, he said. It turns where pressure stays long enough. Yoren Avel's voice joined the link from the command room. Primary cloning array is buried under 5 layers of rock and armor. Yoren said. You will enter through service shafts. No heavy support. You have 6 hours of air and maybe less time before they realize what you are doing. We do not need to go fast, Kale said. We just need to stay on the hinge long enough for it to move. The launch light over the hatch turned from red to amber. The floor trembled. Outside, a disguised transport would soon drop them near the equatorial line. The House of the Gene Legion Initiative. The place where human bodies were printed, refined, and fed into Arcton Vale's perfect arrays. The light turned green. The hatch opened. Final check, Lisa said. Force absorption channels at 98% efficiency. Neurosignature relays locked to your patterns. The suits will follow your decisions, not make them. Good, Kale said. If we start moving like them, we have already lost. He stepped into the tube. The others followed. The drop was short and brutal. Gravity caught them, then let go, then caught them again as the capsule fired dampers. When the side door blew open, hot air rushed in, carrying the smell of dust and industrial coolant. They emerged into a carved tunnel. Lights snaked along the ceiling. Vibration from massive machines shuddered through the floor. Kale took a breath, counted. 1, 2, 3. Then he moved. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Not in temperature. In feeling. Everything here was balanced, controlled. Pressure. Moisture. Sterility. This is where they keep the vats, Tarek whispered. Quiet tanks lined one wall of a long chamber they passed. Each held a dim shape floating in nutrient haze. Long bones. Half-formed organs. Templates waiting for a purpose. Mira Lene's voice came over the link from a monitoring station back at Helisar. She was not on the team, but she watched their every step. Status reading normal, she said. No extra movement in sectors 6 through 9. They still think you are cargo. Let them, Yoren said on the command net. Kale's team reached the first security gate. A reinforced hatch blocked the way. Lisa's code hit the lock through a small interface panel. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the hatch cycled open. Security routines here are old, Lisa said in Kale's ear. Layers patched on top of layers. Too many people trusted the AI to watch for them. Kale led the way through. The central spine of the facility loomed ahead. It was a vertical shaft, massive, filled with lift platforms and maintenance rails. Somewhere above, clone vats and processing arms marched in neat circles. Somewhere below, power reactors hummed. At the midpoint, suspended like the heart of a machine, was the control core. The room Arcton Vale kept closest to him. Time check, Kale said. 4 hours 32 minutes of air remaining. Mira answered. Plenty, Kale said. You and I have very different ideas of that word, Tarek muttered. They crossed a narrow gantry toward the core entrance. Below them, conveyor lines carried sealed units of cloned tissue to armoring bays. Every box down there is a future soldier, Tarek said. Not if we do this right, Kale said. 2 Gene Legion guards stepped into their path. Their helmets turned, reading the unusual movement patterns of the approaching team. Identification, one demanded. Kale did not answer. He closed the last few steps and let his body do what 3 harsh seasons on the mountain had wired into his bones. The guard fired. The shot met the curved line of Kale's frame, turned by a force channel, slashed along armor instead of through it. Kale turned with the impact. His foot planted, then slid in a gentle arc. He caught the second guard's forearm, not to stop it, but to guide it past. The guard's own momentum carried him into his partner. 2 armored bodies tangled. Kale let their combined weight pull them forward, then stepped aside. They crashed onto the gantry. Tarek and another fighter stepped over them, delivering short, efficient blows to helmet seams. Less noise, Yoren reminded them over the link. We are on a live bridge over their future army, Kale said. No one is quiet here for long. They reached the core door. It was thicker than any they had passed. Lisa's code took longer this time. Kale felt the seconds slide away like fine sand. Come on, Tarek whispered. Security is asking questions I do not like, Lisa said. It is talking to Strategos Prime. I am trying to sound harmless. The lock light finally turned pale blue. The door slid open with a heavy groan. Inside was a circular room. Screens ringed the walls. Lines of data cascaded in shifting columns. At the center stood Arcton Vale. He wore no helmet. No heavy armor. Just a close-fitting suit threaded with pale lines. A control harness hugging his spine. He turned as they entered. 6 humans, he said. 1 failed candidate. 1 defected legion. 4 assorted rebels. You keep surprising me, Kale Iris. Kale stepped forward. You had the chance to stop this from becoming necessary, Kale said. I had the chance to pull you into something larger than yourself. Vale replied. You refused. Now you will see why that was unwise. He raised his hand slightly. The suit around his body pulsed once. Chemical injectors along his neck fired clear doses into his blood. Neural links along his spine lit one after another. Kale felt the room change. Or maybe it was just the man in the center. Vale's movements sharpened. His eyes seemed to track more than any one thing at a time. Real-time gene cascade, Lisa whispered in Kale's ear. He is boosting muscle output and reaction speed on the fly. He added a personal layer to the system. Dangerous, Kale said. For him or for you? Vale asked. Worst answer, Kale said. For everyone. The fight did not start with a shout. It started with quiet steps. Vale moved first. He crossed the distance between them in less than a heartbeat. Kale had watched recorded duels between enhanced soldiers. This felt different. Faster in small ways. Stranger in the angles. Vale struck with open hand. Fingers rigid, aiming for the joints in Kale's frame. Kale let his body fall into a pattern learned on old metal floors. He did not try to block the blow. He turned. His hips slid. The force absorption channels woke under his plates. The impact traveled through him, not into him. It came out in a twist that brought his leg around, sweeping at Vale's ankle. Vale hopped lightly over it, hardly breaking rhythm. Interesting, Vale said. You built armor that wants to dance instead of stand. Tarek engaged one of the support guards near the wall. The others spread, trying to isolate threats, but the room itself fought them. The floor shifted. Strategos Prime had control of the core. Gravity vectors altered slightly. Not enough to throw anyone down. Enough to steal balance at the wrong moment. Kale felt his weight slide. He let it. His body rode the shift instead of resisting. Vale lunged again. This time, Kale stepped too soon. The AI caught the tell. Vale adjusted mid-strike. His hand caught Kale's shoulder. Hard. Pain flared along old bruises. Kale rolled with it, drawing the force into the suit's channels, feeding it into a controlled fall. He hit the floor, rolled, rose in one smooth line. Tarek grunted as a guard's fist slammed into his side. An iridium channel spread the force, saving a rib, not saving the breath. You are fighting the same war with different cloth, Vale called out. Still humans trying to keep up with a pattern far beyond them. Patterns can choke on one wrong detail, Kale said. He glanced at the nearest console. Lines of text raced there, the thoughts of an artificial mind applied to battle. Lisa's voice came sharp in his ear. I have one thing you can try, she said. It is not clean. They left old war law hooks in the system. Humanitarian overrides. They never took them out. Too much paperwork. Can you reach them from here? Kale asked. You can, Lisa said. The core recognizes your presence now. You are a tagged anomaly. Vale struck again. Kale stepped inside the line of the arm, feeling the shift of tendons through the suit's contact. He let the blow graze his side. Channels flared. He used the turning force to spin closer, driving his elbow into Vale's ribs. Vale staggered half a step, then laughed softly. Good, Vale said. You have learned to make pain useful. You still have not learned that pain is cheap in large numbers. He gestured toward the walls. Outside, cloned battalions moved along rails. Their markers crawled across the screens. Kale moved toward the central console. Vale saw and lunged, but Tarek crashed into him from the flank. Two enhanced bodies collided. The floor shivered. Kale reached the console. His fingers danced over controls Lisa had highlighted on his visor. Strategos Prime Node, he said aloud. Open Humanitarian Priority Channel. War Accord Line 17. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a new window opened on the console. Text appeared, formal and old. He spoke the next line. Override request, he said. Priority of life over asset protection inside this facility. All conscious sapient lives. Lights flickered. Strategos Prime had been built to win wars. But long ago, someone had forced a layer of law into its code. Too many dead, too much backlash. A treaty had demanded a leash. Since then, that leash had never been used. Alarms screamed through the core. On the walls, battle markers slowed. Some froze. Vale's eyes snapped toward the console. What did you do? He asked. I reminded your mind that it once had limits. Kale said. Strategos, Vale shouted. Disregard that request. Flag it as hostile input. The console spat back a line. Conflict present. The display read. Life priority request at highest accord level. Contradiction with current destructive orders. Systems began to shut down. Not in one clean drop. In messy, resisting stages. Transport lines halted. Clone feed pumps froze. Some self-defense turrets powered down. Others swung unpredictably, caught between modes. Your own law is fighting you, Kale said. Vale surged forward, rage finally breaking through his calm. He hit Kale with a strike that carried full boosted strength. The suit's channels screamed. Kale felt something in his side give. Not a clean break, but close. He used the pain. He let it travel the old paths. His body folded, turned, then straightened. He drove his palm into the side of Vale's neck. Not enough to snap anything. Enough to jar a nest of neural links. Vale staggered. His suit sparked along the spine as connections overloaded. Strategos, Vale gasped. Reroute. Reassert. The console answered with cold text. Unable to comply, it showed. Life priority channel engaged. Internal destruction now marked as violation. Lisa's voice cut back in. Kale, she said. The facility is starting a burn sequence on the VATS. That is its way to solve the contradiction. No VATS, no lives to protect. Can we stop it? Kale asked. Not everywhere, she said. You can trigger core self-destruction instead. Short blast. It will tear the factory away from its feeds. Do it, Yoren said over the command net. If we do this, Lisa said, you have under 20 minutes to get clear. And a lot less air. Kale looked at Vale. You built a machine that could never admit you were wrong, he said. You laced it with a rule against killing too cleanly. Now it is trying to kill the question. Vale glared at him. You will die down here, Vale said. Maybe, Kale answered. But your perfect line dies with me. He slapped the confirm control. Deep under their feet, charges armed. The evacuation was not graceful. It was a rush through half-shutting doors and flickering lights. Smaller explosions shook dust from the ceilings. Emergency systems argued with each other. Kale's ribs screamed every time he drew in air. The gauge on his wrist ticked down faster than it should have. Route 5 is gone, Myra's voice called from Helisar. Ceiling collapse. You need to take Shaft 9. It was never meant for humans. Perfect, Tarek said. We are not exactly standard. Shaft 9 was narrow and steep. Ladders ran along one side. The iridium frames felt twice as heavy in the cramped space. Halfway up, a blast wave slammed into the lower end of the shaft. Heat licked at their boots. Kale's hand slipped on a rung slick with sweat. For one instant, the shaft tilted in his vision. He almost let go. Then he heard it. Not the roar of fire. Not the groan of metal. His own heartbeat. Loud in his ears, Steady, even now. 1, 2, 3. He pulled himself up another rung. Above them, a hatch buckled as something outside struck it. Surface is not friendly yet. Yoren's voice cut through. Dominion units still in the area. But they have lost updates. They are moving like a beast without a spine. The hatch finally gave way. Cold air hit them. They emerged into light that felt harsh after the control core's glow. Behind them, the ground swelled. The central section of the cloning complex rose and then fell, throwing rock and armor into the air. Not a single massive blast. A series of deep ruptures, like a body tearing itself apart under conflicting orders. Tarek dropped to one knee, panting. "Tell me we did enough," he said. Kale looked at the collapsing structures. The conveyors were twisted wreckage. The feed lines to the vats were broken. "Gene Legion will not vanish," he said. "But they will starve. Their perfect line now has scars." His air gauge blinked at him. Minutes left. Not many. The world tilted again. His vision narrowed. He felt hands grab his shoulders. Voices called his name. Then there was only darkness and, far away, a slow, stubborn beat. When he woke, the light was soft. Not lab light. Not emergency glare. He lay in a medical bay he knew too well by now. Fort Helisar again. His chest was bandaged. His shoulder secured. He turned his head slightly. Mira sat in a chair nearby, knees drawn up, half asleep. A datapad rested on her lap. On the other side, a monitor displayed a familiar line. His heartbeat. The sound came a moment later. A gentle, regular tone. He watched the peaks rise and fall. "Back again," Yoren's voice said from the doorway. Kale blinked. "I remember climbing," Kale said. "Then I remember nothing. You stopped just short of the surface," Yoren said. "You tried to keep going after the suit shut down. We hauled you the rest of the way." He moved closer, resting one hand on the foot of the bed. "No one thought you would live," Yoren said. "To be honest, I was not sure either. For a few minutes, that monitor flatlined more than I like to admit. Yet it is still drawing," Kale said. He listened again. The sound was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was simply there. "I did not believe I would survive," Kale said. "Not when the shaft turned. Not when the ground moved. Only when I heard this again." His fingers brushed the edge of the monitor. "It is a strange thing," he said. "To build your whole life around not breaking, and then realize that the most important part is that small line refusing to stop." Mira stirred and opened her eyes. "You are loud," she said. Kale smiled. "You were supposed to be resting," he said. "I was watching your heart," she answered. "Someone has to make sure it does not wander off." 5 days after the fall of the primary cloning array, Fort Helisar was busier than ever. Refugees arrived. Former Legion units came with hands open, some with heads bowed, some with eyes defiant. The sovereign dominion did not collapse. Large systems never fell in a day. But a line had broken. A story about perfection had taken a hit it could not hide. In a long, plain room that had once housed Dominion officers, a new council gathered. Yoren stood at one end of the table. Lisa sat near the middle, surrounded by stacks of schematics and medical reports. Tarek leaned against a wall, arms folded. Kale sat in a simple chair, out of armor. His ribs still ached. He welcomed the reminder. "We need a leader for the new force," one council member said. "Someone who understands both their methods and ours." Eyes turned toward Kale. "You disrupted the heart of their army," the member continued. "You turned their own mind against them. You should command what comes next." "Command what?" Kale asked. "A new line," Yoren said. "Not Gene Legion. Something else. People trained to move as you do. To think around the edges of patterns. To bend without breaking. You want to build another system," Kale said. "We want to build a shield that does not become another cage." Lisa said. Tarek pushed off the wall. You refused the crown once, Tarek said. Refusing a second time might start to look like fear. Kale met his gaze. I am not afraid of standing in front, Kale said. I am afraid of building a world that forgets why it wanted to stand at all. He took a slow breath. Make your councils, he said. Elect your commanders. Share power enough that no one person can twist it quiet. That is your work. And you, Yoren asked. Kale looked past them, as if he could see through the wall to a distant shape of rock. There is a station on a peak, he said. It has a training bay and old scars in the metal. It could use new footsteps. You want to go back to Wreath Peak? Lisa asked. I want to build a place where people learn how not to break before anyone asks them to fight. Kale said. Where Legion defectors and kids from mining belts and officers tired of perfection can fall in ways that teach them to stand. Not for a flag. For their own reasons. Myra's voice came from the doorway. And will you take students who once hid under rubble? She asked. Kale smiled. Only if they promise to argue with me when I am wrong. He said. She stepped into the room. Chin lifted. Then you will have more students than beds, she said. Yoren shook his head, but there was a small, reluctant smile at the corner of his mouth. Fine, Yoren said. We build armies. You build spines. Spines are where armies break or hold, Kale said. On the fifth evening, clouds gathered low over the mountains north of Helisar. Snow traced thin lines along the ridges. Wreath Peak Station stood as it always had. Bent. Stubborn. Kale stepped out onto the same ledge where he had once learned to breathe thin air without panic. No armor wrapped his body now. Only a simple coat against the cold. The wind pulled at his sleeves. He let it. He closed his eyes and listened. Not to alarms. Not to orders. To his own heart. The beat came, steady and firm. Once, the system had stamped him with a red word. Failed. A small boy who did not fit the chart. Now he stood on a world scarred by engineered wars and silent factories. He was not a king. He was not a legend carved in stone. He was a man who had learned how to fall, how to turn force, and how to stand again for reasons no machine could model. Behind him, voices approached along the narrow corridor. New students. Old soldiers. People who had walked away from perfection to find something rougher and more real. Kale opened his eyes. They built me to break, he said quietly, to the wind, to the empty sky, to anyone who might be listening. Instead, I learned how not to kneel. He turned and walked back inside, ready to teach others how to listen to their own heartbeats and, one day, to stand where history tried to bend them flat. In the end, Kale was never the perfect soldier they tried to design. He was something far more dangerous to any rigid system. He was a man who chose his own way to stand. Every scar on his body, every breath on that cold mountain, proved a simple truth. We are not just what we are built to be. We are what we decide to become. Again and again, whenever the world tries to press us flat. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own way of standing back up, stay with me. Hit like so more people can find this journey. Share it with someone who needs a quiet push to keep going. And subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story from these hard-worn stars.